I look back to an example that I actually put in the book, Dr. Hughes, when I was negotiating a contract. And I was given the responsibility from my CEO to negotiate a contract to provide services on our radiology equipment and other types of patient equipment within the hospital. And we were looking for savings. It was the right thing to do. We were looking for savings. And so I brought in about 4 to 5 vendors into that hospital and went through every detail that I thought I was going through, every detail of what should be done, what the price was, what the services were. Went back to my CEO and said, hey, listen, I've figured out this is the best company to go with. And so he asked me a few questions and we went through it and signed the contract and moved on, and we transitioned services. Everything was going great. We had savings. The equipment was being serviced. And then I received a phone call one day from the radiology director, and he said, Jeff, I've got a CT scanner that is down, like it's totally not working. And I called the vendor to fix it, and they said it's not covered under that contract. And I said, oh, no, they're wrong. They're wrong. It's covered under that contract. Dr. Hughes, it was not covered under that contract. I had made a huge mistake to where such a vital piece of equipment was down, and we did not have a service contract on it. So I went to my CEO and I was honest and transparent, not knowing what consequence may come with that, fully expecting a consequence to come with that poor decision making that I had. And his first words to me were, what did you learn?
You're listening to Lead with Dr. Ralph Hughes, leadership thought leader, author, and keynote speaker.
Hello, everyone. We're thrilled to have you join us for another insightful episode, and welcome again to Season 2 of Lead with Dr. Ralph Hughes Leadership Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to bringing issues to light that hinder people in leadership positions and offers best practices from organizational leaders who got it right and industry experts who can share their perspectives. Today, we talk about merciful leadership, guiding us through this discussion and providing invaluable insight. I am honored once again to introduce our esteemed guest. With over 30 years in healthcare and 20 in leadership, our guest is a regional VP at Select Medical, overseeing 9 hospitals in the Critical Illness Recovery Division. With clinical roots in nursing and advanced degrees in business and strategic leadership, he founded Mercy Speaks to champion merciful leadership, an approach grounded in empathy, compassion, and understanding. As a speaker and author, our guest inspires leaders to build high-performing teams and improve patient care through values-driven leadership. His mission is to transform healthcare by empowering leaders to lead with mercy in today's complex and demanding environment. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome back to the show once again for Season 2, Dr. Jeff Radford.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Thank you so much. What a great introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be back with you here on Season 2. I celebrate that with you. Season 2 of your podcast. What a wonderful podcast for people, but it's an honor to be here with you in this session to talk about merciful leadership.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Radford. It's definitely a pleasure and honor to be before you once again. I had to bring you back on because I was intrigued by merciful leadership. But you have 2 books, Merciful Leadership and Mercy Leadership. And we're going to dive specifically into those 2 books today. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Before we go ahead and get started, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so as you said, been in healthcare over 30 years. I literally started in healthcare as an emergency medical technician at the age of 17 years old. So that's dated me just a little bit because I've just told you over 30 years of experience. I hit the big 50 this year. So I've been in healthcare for quite a while. And I literally joined to spend time with my dad. That was my goal. He had an interest in that. He was a pastor of a church, but also had an interest in that side of healthcare. So I joined to spend time with him so we would have even some more commonalities together. And when I joined and became an emergency medical technician, I quickly learned that healthcare was my calling. And so I wanted to advance in healthcare. So from riding my bicycle to the rescue squad building. We only had one car, and he used it for church business a lot. So when a rescue squad call would happen, I would jump on my bicycle and ride through the streets of a little town in Virginia and go and help. And then knowing that that's what I wanted to do, I enrolled in nursing school in that community. And God puts people in our lives, mentors in our lives. And I noticed there was a male nurse that oftentimes when I went to the local hospital, he commanded the scene and he knew what he was doing. So I thought, I want to be just like that guy. So I went into nursing school, became a registered nurse, and I wanted to work in ICU or ER. However, God humbled me and said, there's no opportunities in those. They're not hiring new graduates. And so I began on med surge, on night shift. And then the story just continues to where I advanced through the operating room, case management, and then found that leadership in healthcare was a passion that I wanted to go into to help other people through that avenue. And so many, many, many years later, here I am supporting several hospitals for the company that I work for, celebrating a 16-year anniversary for this same company in the month of June of this year.
Congratulations. What a wonderful story and background. And I appreciate you. And thank you so much for your service as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
We want everyone to be recognized. And that's one of the things about this show, that everyone is a leader. We believe that everyone has the capacity and ability to lead because we all have knowledge, skills, abilities, talents, and gifts. And so you can lead, as I say, lead where you are. So
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
Let's dive into your book, Merciful Leadership. One of the things when I read your book that stood out to me immediately is what you mentioned. You wrote, the traditional picture of a leader looks a lot like the crusty bosses from the endless sitcoms people have grown up watching on TV.
Yeah.
Stodgy old men passing down judgment from on high about how their employees were to look, behave, and perform. And for many years, this stereotype has rung true. These judgmental leaders practice an autocratic style of leadership and are dictators instead of leaders that develop others. Talk to us a little bit about that. What inspired you to make such a strong statement?
Well,
and what truth have you seen behind it?
No, those are great questions. I'm tired of the same old, and I think I've been on this mission even through my doctoral program, studying strategic leadership, and we share going to Regent University as a commonality between us. But when I was studying leadership methods, but also looking back on experiences that I have had as I've grown throughout my career, I came up with an idea that there are leadership, or actually people that want leaders who show value. And when I talk about the stodgy old shows of, I think about going to a factory and looking at the boss who sat up in the window and looked over the people, and you do as I say, but not necessarily as I do. And then secondly, didn't even know who he was talking to because there was no value there. That's not what people want these days. We live in a generation or multi-generational existence of our population. As George Barna would put it, it's a mosaic generation. He said one time at Regent University, actually in our chapel, he said, the way that I look at this generation is like a painting that's a mosaic painting. And I'll tell you, Dr. Hughes, when I look at paintings, if they have any kind of abstract, it's not a clear picture, I can't interpret that painting. It has to be plain and simple of a house or water or mountains. And he said this mosaic generation is like those paintings where you see multiple colors that are just splashed onto the canvas. He said, literally, that's what they are, because we look at such a diversity of people nowadays in the workforce that you can't simply say, do this, and people just march to the orders. That's not what it's about. Right. The workforces that we're dealing with have some of those people still in there, but you also have a majority of people that really want to feel valued in their role and respected in that role. And so you have to influence differently these days than that stodgy old boss who's pointing the finger and knows nothing about what's going on, knows nothing about the procedure or the processes, knows nothing about the people. You can't influence like that anymore. So that's why I worded it, because I'm ready for change. And I think that I have found success throughout my career with this methodology of merciful leadership to where it simply puts in components into the workplace where people feel like that the leader values them and takes the time to understand what they're doing and understand them as well.
Excellent. I love that. I also saw in your book where you talked about the judgmental leader.
Mm-hmm.
What is the concept of the judgmental leader, and if it actually is such a notion as such, and
Yeah.
what does it look like in today's workplace, and why is it so damaging to individuals and organizational culture?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that autocratic kind of style of leadership to where a leader who's in the workplace and something happens that they automatically assume the fault of someone without investigating what the real causes are. Quick to rush to this word judgment to where I'm just going to put blame on you, take no accountability myself, and move you out of the way because you made a mistake or I think you made a mistake, so I'm not going to take the time to invest in you. That's literally what I think about when we think about judgment of rushing to a decision about someone that works for us as a leader without taking the time to figure out all the information or gather the information and without investing in that person to figure out the root causes of what's going on. So it's that quick, I'm not going to take time. I'm going to judge you quickly. And whether I'm right or wrong, well, in those cases, they're always right. Those leaders are. They're always right. And they move people quickly out of the organization without taking the time to invest in them. That's simply what the concept is. And I've seen that happen in my career. And people in that type of setting walk around in fear of retribution of what's going to go on, fear their jobs. And so they lose creativity. Your retention goes up. You're not going to retain those employees. You're going to have a hard time recruiting because that leader is within that organization and nobody wants to come in based on word of mouth to come work for them, or they figure it out very quickly. You know, it's that kind of I've got you mentality. I've caught you doing this. I've got you. I'm always looking out for the mistakes you're going to make and then the fear that comes along with that. So that's what I think we have to move out. I often say in some of the talks that I give, Dr. Hughes, we're in the organization business, but more importantly, we're in the people business. And the people are what drives the organization. And we've got to, as leaders, recognize that.
Right, right. It's an excellent point. I'm going to transition to your book, Mercy Leader. I know
Sure.
you have two books. One is Merciful Leader, and your other book, Mercy Leader. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think you published Merciful Leader in 2011 and Mercy Leader in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you went back in the archives there. So for your audience, I would recommend them to look up Mercy Leader because that would be the most
Okay.
updated edition through Amazon.
Okay.
And so it has kind of refreshed views within Mercy Leader. So that would be something that I've even learned from the days back when I first looked at that publication that you referred to now, because I want people to kind of put an attachment in to have a goal to become a Mercy Leader. And then that book that you're talking about, Mercy Leader, breaks down these characteristics of how we can simply apply these characteristics into our life and be proud and be grateful that we can become a Mercy Leader within our organizations to drive results through that way.
All right. Well, then tell us your story of how you experienced Mercy Leadership
Yeah.
and how you came up with the concept of Mercy Leadership.
You know, I look back to an example that I actually put in the book, Dr. Hughes, when I was negotiating a contract. And I was given the responsibility from my CEO to negotiate a contract to provide services on our radiology equipment and other types of patient equipment within the hospital. And we were looking for savings. It was the right thing to do. We were looking for savings. And so I brought in about 4 to 5 vendors into that hospital and went through every detail that I thought I was going through, every detail of what should be done, what the price was, what the services were. Went back to my CEO and said, hey, listen, I've figured out this is the best company to go with. And so he asked me a few questions and we went through it and signed the contract and moved on and we transitioned services. Everything was going great. We had savings. The equipment was being serviced. And then I received a phone call one day from the radiology director and he said, Jeff, I've got a CT scanner that is down, like it's totally not working. And I called the vendor to fix it. And they said it's not covered under that contract. And I said, oh, no, they're wrong. They're wrong. It's covered under that contract. Dr. Hughes, it was not covered under that contract. I had made a huge mistake to where such a vital piece of equipment was down and we did not have a service contract on it. So I went to my CEO and I was honest and transparent, not knowing what consequence may come with that, fully expecting a consequence to come with that poor decision making that I had. And his first words to me is, or were, what did you learn? That was one of the most impactful moments in my career because my mentor, sitting across the desk, took the time with me to figure out, what did you learn? And I said, I learned that I'm going to make sure every time I read every word of the contract, this will never happen again. And I just kept spilling it out, spilling it out. Right. And it all worked out because we were able to bring in a mobile CT scanner. And then what was kind of an antiquated piece of equipment anyway, we were able to buy a new CT scanner, which actually provided better services for the community. But that was an act of forgiveness that forever impacted my career. To add on to that, while I was in my doctoral program studying these other methods of leadership, I really believe, Dr. Hughes, it was a God thing to where this method of leadership came to my mind, to say, you need to write about this. Because really, when you look at the other leadership concepts, this method of leadership mentions the word forgiveness, which in itself, if anybody has ever had the ability to experience forgiveness in their life through whatever, through a person, through a higher being, whatever it may be, it is life-changing and you never forget it. And so when I thought about what a powerful word, but not only just a word, what a powerful action it is to actually provide forgiveness in the workplace, then that creates an environment where people will do anything to make sure that they serve you and walk the extra steps for you and get those results.
Excellent. What a wonderful story. And yeah, when you don't show forgiveness, or in your case, in a lot of cases, I should say, mercy to employees, what happens is they become very nervous and unsure about how to even operate in their space. So that's very important. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in what ways can adopting the principles of mercy leadership truly transform individuals, teams, and even entire communities?
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to that action of forgiveness. So in the book, I talk about some characteristics in regards to what does it take to actually forgive people. Once again, if you've been on the side of forgiveness and actually had that impact of forgiveness, it is life-changing. And so when I think about somebody who is actually taking the time to invest in me and show compassion and love, and I'm not talking too fluffy here. Some of the listeners may say, how can you love your employees? Well, there is a love that you can love your employees because that love leads to the action of compassion. Where St. Thomas says compassion is when you actually secure yourself or become like what is going on with that employee. For instance, if somebody's hurting, we hurt. If somebody is in need, we understand that. We try to service that need. And so when you start doing actions of kindness through compassion, through forgiveness, through love, the receiver of that actually will take that opportunity and it will make them want to do anything. Whereas I think it creates that environment where I talked about judgmental leadership shuts down the opportunity to be creative. If I know that I've got an atmosphere to where I can work with you and have dialogue and I know you care about me, then the creative bells start to go off because I want your organization to be better because it's my organization too, as a follower, as somebody who's under that leadership style. When I think about forgiveness in communities, I mean, look through our world right now. There's so much hatred and bitterness, and there needs to be acts of kindness and love and compassion and forgiveness at times because people make mistakes. We do forget that we have people that work for us, Dr. Hughes, and they'll say, well, how can you overlook it? I'm not saying overlook it because times I've been forgiven, it's not being overlooked of the issue that I'm being forgiven for, but it's actually even in a disciplinary process. So for instance, if I'm giving a disciplinary process to a team member because that's our policy and we're going to hold to a standard, I don't just do the disciplinary process and then go away because that's not anything that's going to be impactful for the employee. All they know is they use these terms. I got written up. That's what I hear. I was written up, and whatever that may mean to them. But we do the disciplinary process, Dr. Hughes, and then we have a conversation of, I care about you and I value you on my team. And I want to know how you and I can work together to prevent this from happening again, because you deserve to be on my team. And you do such a great job in other areas. So how can we make sure this doesn't happen? When you have dialogue and conversation like that, all of a sudden a disciplinary process, although hurtful at times, becomes an opportunity to have conversation with the leader to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And that's an act of forgiveness, because we've dealt with it, but we've moved past it. We've moved on. And now we're trying to give that team member the tools and the resources to be successful in the organization.
Excellent. And so leaders who adopt the Mercy leadership framework, they're not considered bosses, because you talked about the boss stereotype.
Absolutely.
And we know that the boss stereotype is deeply ingrained in our culture.
Yeah.
They're strict, emotionally detached, and results driven. But in your view, how has this image hindered real leadership? And what is the boss stereotype?
Yeah, I think instead of, when we look at, if I could talk about, when we look at God, people say you need to fear God. And fear God means I'm afraid of this being that could do horrible things to me because I'm afraid of God. Whereas we have to realize that God cares about us. And in that aspect, Dr. Hughes, he provides forgiveness for us, and he loves us and wants to have communication with us, and he wants the best for us. So when I think about a boss who simply just barks orders and expects people to march on because I have authority, they look at the role and not themselves in the role. I'm grateful for the role that I'm in, but it's not about the title for me. It's about utilizing the concept of the role and the abilities of the role to serve hundreds of people every single day, and to literally touch the lives of patients through influence, and make sure they have quality of care every single day. It's utilizing the role, but it's not the title for me. The title means nothing to me. It's like, what abilities do I have in the role to actually serve people to ensure that they're successful and our patients are well taken care of? When you change your viewpoint of that, you're no longer a boss, you're serving people. And you're in every aspect of how does this impact the people that I serve, because I care about them. A boss simply wants their own agenda achieved. A boss simply wants results driven, which we have to have results, but there's no middle ground of caring about the people who achieve those results. And so I look past the people to get to the result. I think in merciful leadership, I look to the people to get the result. And there's the difference.
Excellent. Excellent. You also wrote in your book, and I'm just going to paraphrase, our children look to you for leadership. And when a friend asks for your advice, he or she is asking you to lead them. Sometimes leadership may be imposed whether you're ready for it or not. That's what you said. So in essence, leadership is often thrust upon individuals in everyday life, whether as a parent, mentor, or friend. Essentially, that's what you were saying.
Yes.
But how does recognizing these roles help us better understand the essence of being a mercy leader?
Yeah, I think when you look at it through those eyes, so a lot of people say, I'm not prepared for this. Or if we go to those examples of children coming up to you and you're a parent, I think sometimes we look at parenthood as either a task, frustrating at times, demanding at times, sleepless nights, and all the things that come with that. But when I look at how my parents raised me, and I was very fortunate to be in a great home, I didn't necessarily respect the guidance they gave me at the time. But then when I had my own children and have seen that now my children are adults, I have seen sometimes the mirroring of things that I taught them. It has brought to the forefront the great responsibility that we have to invest in those that look up to us, whether that's a child or in the church that I serve in, whether it's a child who I engage with that comes just to ask a question. It's taking the time to answer that question. I had a nurse one time years ago, Dr. Hughes, and for the people in healthcare, they'll kind of understand this. She came to me and she held up a syringe that had a medication in it. And she said, is this 5 units on the syringe? Now, anybody else would have looked at that situation and said, she's not competent because it clearly says the number 5 and it was a unit syringe. So that put together means 5 units. When I evaluated that situation quickly, all I did is I validated to her, yes, that's 5 units. She never asked again, and I don't think she needed to know that it was 5 units. I think she wanted my time and validation that she was doing what she was appropriately supposed to be doing. She had drawn up 5 units, and she went on to take care of that patient because she was a good nurse. There were no issues, performance issues at all with her. Sometimes we lose sight of the great responsibility that whether we're in a family, we're a parent, we're a friend, other things that may happen, Dr. Hughes, there are leadership opportunities every single day that are presented to us to be a mentor, to guide, to validate. And it simply requires us now seeing that it's not about us, it's about the people we interact with. And once we realize that, then we do take the time for other people. We just sometimes have to get to that mentality because it's natural to think about ourselves and it's natural to do what we want to do. But I think part of that calling that we have for all of us is to be mentors and guides to other people to raise each other up, because I have to look to mentors myself at times, and we have to raise each other up to be a better society and better people. And when we do that, we have a better culture throughout the world.
Right, right. And that's an excellent example of being merciful,
Yes.
showing that merciful leadership. So I appreciate that. And you put everything in perspective for me by that example. And I appreciate that. And you were not demonstrating or displaying being a judgmental boss, by the way. But let me ask you, is merciful leadership just simply about being kind?
No, I think it goes beyond that, because in some of the characteristics I talk about, it goes beyond that because it takes a continual commitment in our actions to other people. It takes somewhat of an innate ability to have courage. Courage when people may not understand this leadership style, or they don't think you're moving fast enough, or they don't think you're holding that word accountable to other people. It goes beyond that action of kindness. Kindness is a driver, I would say, as a characteristic or a component, but literally the actions of I can be kind to people in how I interact, but I also don't have to forgive. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a compiling, stacking components of each other that when you're practicing all this in your leadership style, that's when I say you can claim the component and ownership of being a merciful leader, because it's not just the act of kindness. You've got to have other actions that go along with it. Kindness is great. But I engaged someone just recently, Dr. Hughes. I was in Mississippi this week traveling for work. I was sitting in a restaurant and I was watching my waiter, a younger guy, and I was watching how he interacted with people. And he was phenomenal. And so I brought him over and I said, "What do you think your number one characteristic is?" He said, "I'm kind." And I said, "I agree. I agree that you're kind, but you're also enthusiastic. And I see you engaging with people and going around engaging with people." And I said, and with those two components, you can do anything you want to in this world. And so when I look at that kindness word that you mentioned, we can be kind all day long, but it doesn't necessarily mean I take the time to understand people, or that I'm serving other people continuously, or I have the courage to be a merciful leader, or that I'm committed as well. It takes a mixture of all these components to actually be fruitful and get those results as a merciful leader.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, because it seems in today's society, it's the norm to be without empathy, compassion, sympathy,
Yeah.
servantry, and yes, without mercy. Unfortunately, we see
Yes.
more and more of that. So I do believe there's a place for mercy leadership in our society, because in a society, it often seems to reward cold ambition over compassion. And
Yes.
so, yes, we definitely need more compassion, we need more empathy, and we definitely need more mercy. So I appreciate that.
Yes,
Excellent.
sir.
So, how can people, and I know we're talking about professionals in the workplace, but how can people of all walks of life began leading with mercy in their homes, workplaces, churches, and the communities?
Absolutely. I think it first starts with our own mindset. We have to be willing to do it. We have to be willing to make sure that every day when we wake up, we know that our purpose is to extend mercy to other people. And when ourselves get in the way of that, to have recognition that ourself is getting in the way of that, that judgmental attitude that sometimes we develop towards other people. And we need to remind ourselves continuously as we invest into our mindset that I am designed to be merciful to other people. And I need to make sure that I practice forgiveness today, show love and compassion to other people. Because oftentimes what happens is we'll start something new, no matter whatever it may be, and then we go back to our same old habits and our same old ways. And so I think the first thing we have to do, despite where you come from, your background, etc., you have to realize that I'm going to be committed to practice this every day. And I'm going to put things in place in my life to ensure that I'm reminding myself that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so when those things come up, as somebody recently said to me, life is lifing. That means life is going to be life. And there are going to be certain situations that come into our life that challenge us and make us go to that judgmental style that we may have had in our families or whatever it may be. We have to remind ourselves continuously that has to be top of mind. Merciful. I've got to be merciful in this situation. I've got to be merciful. I've got to show kindness in this situation. I have to forgive in this situation. I need to be loving today. I've got to have compassion today. Why haven't I taken the time to understand what's really causing that? Because there's been many times as a nurse where I have family members be very, very rude to me as a caregiver. But I've often looked past that to figure out what's the root of that, to try to understand why are they doing that and not to engage in that same behavior back. So it really, Dr. Hughes, takes commitment every single day to not revert back to the way that we used to be, but have a commitment that I'm going to change and I'm going to show compassion and love to other people. And then I'm going to see what that results out as. It's like if I go to someone and I smile, a lot of times they smile back. Now, I've had the opposite effect where people are just angry and grouchy and not smiling that day. Yeah. But you know what? I'm in control of me. And so when people realize I'm not going to let circumstances dictate that I'm going to be this merciful leader or merciful person in my life and show compassion and love, you can truly make an impact on other people because that's what you're going to be remembered for. Dr. Hughes, I'd much rather be remembered for a leader or a person that cared about other people than the opposite of that.
Wow, that's excellent. It's very profound. So for me, what I take out of this is that you're changing the characteristics of a boss from what we are led to believe how a boss is supposed to interact, speak to people, treat people, to how someone in a leadership role is really supposed to behave.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a standard, right? People look, whether we realize it or not, people are looking at our every action all of the time. And when we're off a beat, people recognize that. There are times where I'm direct in communication, but I'm not always direct at times. And so if I'm direct, people realize, hey, this is important, or there's urgency to this. I also write, Dr. Hughes, that I don't want to negate the fact that, because I don't want people to think that there's an alternative course, that sometimes we do have to remove people from our organizations. And in the book, I talk about being merciful to the organization. Because if I have given every opportunity through mercy, then now I have to help that person realize that this is not the right fit. Because what would be more detrimental to the organization than to allow those behaviors to continue, and then everybody else either mirrors that or just feels like there's not a sense of standards and excellence within the organization. So I talk about being merciful to the organization as well, and then also being merciful to that person to help them come to a realization that this just isn't the right fit. And I can do all that with compassion and communication of how we have that conversation. So yes, I think with all that what you're saying is so important, and it actually is so impactful in everything that we do, but it has to just be in every action for sure.
Excellent. And what about just treating people the way you want to be treated, right?
Yeah. Well, in my company, we have a motto that says treat people the way they want to be treated. Because sometimes I think the golden rule, which what we're referring to, sometimes we have to individualize what people's expectations are and how they want to be treated. There's a barrier to that. There's a wall to that for sure because everybody's
Huge.
different in how they want to be treated, right?
Right,
But I
right.
think what you're referring to, I would want somebody to show me respect, to show me kindness, to have open communication, to
Exactly.
give me feedback, to make sure that I'm valued. And I do feel like that with my current organization. I'm not an employee number. They know my name and they've been very, very great to me. So I'm very proud of that.
Mhm.
But also, I feel the same with the team members that I work with. Every site visit that I go on site to try to take the opportunity to engage with the team, to talk to them, to thank them for what they're doing, those type of things. So I think there's so much around what you're talking about that is so crucial and what we do in the organizations. But very, very, very much so. Just having that mindset all the time. Again, I just have to reinforce that having that mindset all the time is very, very important.
Excellent, excellent. So, if there's one thing you want our listeners to walk away with today, what would that be?
I think you have to have a willingness to change, and I think you have to have a willingness to realize that change is required. We have never arrived in these positions. We've never arrived. We've never figured it all out. We never know it all. We do work in a mosaic environment to where we're continually trying to figure out how to best communicate, how to best interact. What I'm simply say in the work that I've done and studied and practiced and applied in my career is that for the majority of people that I have worked with, they simply want to be valued. And when we take the time to insert the components that we've talked about on this podcast today, and we show that they're valued, then we're going to have much better results, a much better positive culture within the organization. The retention is going to be better, and those type of things that are associated with that, and will be better because I'm talking to people that sometimes are burned out. Like, how do you get people to listen to you these days? How do you get people to stay in your organization these days? Those are the people I'm talking about. Those are the problems that I see daily or hear about daily of people that are just leaving the craft of leadership, Dr. Hughes, who are just giving up because they're done with it. They don't want to. They don't want to resolve issues. They're burned out and they're finished because a lot of times they've had this top down approach and people aren't responding to it. I want to bring this fresh new approach it still is fresh and new today, even though I wrote about it years ago, because I don't see it practiced to the degree that it can be
Right.
in organizations to help propel these organizations forward. So I would simply say we've got to realize we have the need for change in ourselves and be willing to adopt these principles in our leadership style and have the courage to do that when it's not popular and just sit back and not necessarily sit back, but be involved and watch the results happen.
Right. And as you know, leadership is not always doing what's popular.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll be challenged at times, right?
Of course, but that's what leadership is all about because we know that
Yeah.
leadership is truly about making a difference.
Just going to say when I work with leaders in the organizations and I'll hear about all these
Mhm.
issues going on within the organization, I'll say that's leadership. So, and exactly that's what it is at times. It's just
Right.
having to be that professional problem solver.
Exactly. Exactly. I really appreciate that. Really enjoyed this conversation. Wish we had more
I have as
time.
well.
How can our listen? Yeah, I tell you, how can our listeners connect with you, learn more about your work, or get a copy of your book?
Yeah, Dr. Hughes, they can go to drjeffradford.com and visit my webpage. And on that has a contact form and also a link to Mercy Leader that'll take them right there. And please reach out to me. I would love to engage with you. On that contact form, I have a couple of free resources for people that contact me. So please reach out, drjeffradford.com. Let me know that you listen to the podcast, and I'd love to talk about merciful leadership to you, and just reach out and I hope you purchase the book and the intention of the book literally is to change the world one mercy leader at a time. So I ask people to join me on this journey, Dr. Hughes, and become a mercy leader.
I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Dr. Radford, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today about leading mercifully. I really love that. It has
Thank
been
you.
my esteemed pleasure and honor talking with you today, and I thank you for that so much. I truly, truly do.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast and tune in every Thursday for fresh content. For more information about this podcast, books, workshops, and training programs, be sure to visit my website at www.drhspeaks.com. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your support in making this podcast possible. It is always a pleasure having you as part of the family. Until the next time, be well, God bless, and lead on.